Hello, good afternoon, and thank you everyone for joining us for day one of the Best Practices Meet 2022. We're very excited to begin this session titled Data-Led Insurance. The scope of the session fundamentally is to discuss a host of things, as it's a broadly titled session. It's to discover a little bit about how data and data innovation has fundamentally changed the insurance landscape in India over the past couple of years, as globally as well. This decade has been a really interesting time for all sectors across the board because data and data sort of utility has been maximized across the spectrum. Some of the challenges, of course, that arise from that, security, privacy challenges that arise, some of the global best practices, some best practices discovered in India, and where the industry is going in the next couple of years. So that's kind of the trajectory of the entire session. We're very excited to have with us a whole host of really interesting panel members. I'm going to quickly introduce them so that they can come on stage. So first we have Mr. Srinath Modali, General Manager, JB Boda Insurance and Reinsurers Brokers Private Limited. We have Mr. Anil, founder at End Now Foundation. We have Mr. Satyanandan, who is Chief Risk Officer at Tata AIG General Insurance Company Limited. And then we have Mr. Narasimhan, who's partner at Ken & Co. So we're very excited to have this very illustrious panel with us. And I'm Anisha Joshi. I'm here at DSCI and
Hi.
Hi, speakers. We're just waiting for. So while he comes on board, I'm just going to start off with Mr. Narasimhan because we have him here. I just want you, Mr. Narasimhan, if you could give us a sort of quick understanding, just 1 second. If I could request all the speakers that are not speaking at the moment to just switch off their mics because there's some disturbance in audio in the background. And when you are speaking, if you could just switch that, that would be great. So, Mr. Narasimhan, because we have you here, if you could quickly just give us a little bit of a landscape and an understanding of how fundamentally data and data-led insurance innovation has changed the insurance landscape in the past decade. Obviously, that's been a massive upheaval in the last couple of years, let's say the COVID years. But of course, that trajectory was not kickstarted, anytime soon. It was happening for, let's say, the last decade or so. So if you could just give us a quick understanding, a little bit of background, some of the new technologies that have come in, some of the sort of fun, interesting, illustrious part of InsurTech. If you could just paint a picture, give us a background and a primer, that'll be great to just start off the session. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you so much. Could you confirm if you're able to hear me before we get started?
We can hear you.
Thank you. Thank you. So, my dear friends, the way in which technology is sort of evolving in every domain, right? Insurance is not far behind. The biggest transition which has happened in the last few years is the number of data points which we have has significantly increased. A simple example was earlier, let's take a very simple insurance example, right? Now you want to get covered through a simple Mediclaim policy. And the thought process is that, hey, I go to an insurance company and I go get a policy. And today in India, most of the medical insurance company, in order to acquire the customer, they say that no medical checkup required, right? But that's only for the first year and the second year, right? But they have a concept that, you can avail a free medical health check done within the first year or the second year, which of course has some bit of, defined parameters. And the reason why these sort of information they're gathering is they can actually assess your health and they can identify, is there a possible risk, right? And that becomes a point for you when you're renewing your insurance premium the subsequent time. This is a standard protocol. But see how things have changed. Now, insurance company are saying, hey, can you link your Fitbit or your Apple iWatch with, the insurance company, which of course we are protecting your privacy and, taking care of it. And what is the end result? The more you walk, right? The more you walk, it's an indication that, hey, this person is healthy. That means the lesser possibility of he or she, having a fatality, which means from an underwriting perspective, the risk is lesser. So this is one simple use case of how data points have significantly increased, right? I can go on for, much more examples, but in the interest of time, I just thought I'll give that as an opening remarks.
Sure, absolutely. Is there any other panelist who wants to just jump in and talk from their perspective? Mr. Srinath, do you want to contribute at this point? Just sort of from your experience, what are some of the significant changes that you've been able to see? Because you've been in this landscape for long enough to understand that data has fundamentally changed the entire game, right? So, is there something pointers, as Mr. Narasimhan pointed out, that you've also noticed and said, "Oh, this is fundamentally a different approach now that we heavily rely on." So, just wanted your opinion on that. Mr. Srinath, I think your mic might be off.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now. Yeah.
Yeah. So, whatever Narsimhan has said, I agree on his points. And today economy runs on the data, and insurance industry is no exception. So, increasing technology and computer processing capabilities and availability of unprecedented amounts of digital consumer information has led to the extensive use of consumer data, and thereby insurance companies are leveraging to drive their business as well as, and they are focusing on the technology and to facilitate the consumers, their customers, and giving more opportunities. So at the same time, they are also tracking the big data and automated algorithms based decision making. And now algorithm based decision making has become a part of the insurance industry. And now insurtech companies are growing very rapidly, and they want to, I mean, leverage the data, and they want to give more what I guess, I mean, we can say, to the economy, to economy run very smoothly. So the artificial intelligence as well as machine learning has given a big opportunity to the insurtech companies to grow in the insurance, in the data led insurance.
Absolutely. In fact, just picking off that point of, just the inclusion of algorithm and algorithmic decision making, and then, of course, machine learning and AI, that obviously brings with itself a whole host of challenges, right? Let's say challenges for privacy, challenges for security, just ethical challenges across the board. So I was wondering, Mr. Satyanandan, if you just wanted to, as an expert, as a risk officer, as somebody who's an expert in the field, if you could just tell us a little bit about some of the key privacy concerns, some of the key security concerns, and how that has been how that has been exacerbated by this whole data inclusion in the insurance sector.
See, I think there is one point which I think everybody should acknowledge that the insurance companies hold the maximum personal data of the customer. I think the nature of the business is like that, where you need to hold the personal data of the customer to in order to stitch the right solutions and in order to service the customer. So with the onset of the data innovation, I think what is the digital acceleration you see across the space in insurance sector. I think it across multiple sector, and insurance has not been behind in this space. So there, the design, from the design point of view, how you are building the systems around the process. So there is always a greater challenge of how you match the speed of the business, where the entire excitement is all about capturing the data of the customer, so that the entire life cycle of the customer is serviced, so that you can onboard him, sustain him, service him, cross sell with him. So there are a lot of business priorities around the how you capture the data and how you use the data, and there are always a service priorities on how you use the data to service the customer. And in the entire scheme of things, I think the privacy and cybersecurity controls, the control aspect, is something which is already now baked into the design phase of the application itself. So now there is always a catch-up game. You will see certain organizations are much ahead of the catch-up game. Certain organizations will be certain behind, because business comes first. And typically, the if you do not embed these controls at the design stage of the applications, the design stage of infrastructure, or at the data governance stage, and if you do not have a right data governance framework, then I think this all would really have an implication in terms of having a poor application with a poor privacy design and a pure cybersecurity design. Now, considering the breaches which you see in the industry and around cybersecurity, I think building a pure secure application from a cybersecurity controls is quite imperative. But with a lack of regulation in the country around data, on the privacy, I think the amount of awareness and amount of I would say design thinking getting into the privacy controls. is something which we are not seeing. So this would be spurred and accelerated only when we see a good regulations in this subject. So I think these are the two areas where you would say, are something where I think all the companies are maybe looking towards it, but there is an acceleration which is quite required in the privacy side of it, which I think once the regulation comes in would really accelerate this entire process.
Just picking off that conversation around regulations, right? So I just want to get just requesting the participants once again, if you're not speaking, to switch off your microphone because there is some disturbance in the background. Um, so just talking to Mr. Anil about, you talk about regulations and the need for regulations and something like that. So I was just wondering, if you could give us a little bit more of a nuanced take on privacy, right? So privacy in the context of underwriting, or privacy in the context of, let's say, servicing, for example. So if you could just take a stab at that and give us specific examples, if possible, just for the audience to relate to it a little bit more.
Yeah, I'm audible, right?
Yeah.
So basically, there's a lot of privacy in the underwriting based on the data that is to be considered. One is the underwriting, and the other one is the excellence. So I would go back to a very classic example that we're hearing right now is if anybody is applying for an accident claim insurance. I believe there are organizations who are trying to do social profiling and come back whether it's true or not. So this is something that there's a privacy breach. So we need to kind of look at what is the portfolio steering they are doing. Is it the right place at the right time in terms of pricing? I'm coming back to the underwriting again. So when it coming into the pricing, this is technically right or wrong. So in terms of blending, human judgment is very, very important. It's not everything about AI and ML. So is it data driven, or is there something about human judgment also getting involved? So in terms of the capacity, are we trying to recalibrate repeated retentions? That is one thing that we also look at. In terms of coverage, we all know that India insurance is the way in which it happens is completely different from the other countries. So is it translative and qualitative, or the, basically quantitative parameters are there? So all these things have to be considered. So because there are people, there are technology, the distribution, there's a strategy. I know there is, end of the day, there's a business, there's a profitability, all this comes into picture. But when it comes to people, are you understanding their culture and how they are empowered in terms of technology, how technology that moves beyond that stack, how it is moving it in terms of distribution, how you can probably that combines analytics and not. So there's a direct translation in terms of strategy to an underwrite appetite. So I mean, this is something that everybody has to think about it. So it's not just creating technology. So there's a privacy part, and ethics are two important things that has to be considered.
Absolutely. Thank you. And in fact, pushing off your argument a little bit more, because the Indian insurance sector has been learning from global best practices, right? We keep evolving, we keep learning. Mr. Narasimham, I just wanted to understand, how that ecosystem has changed, and what are some of the key learnings that we've learned over the past couple of years, and what are some of those things that, because we obviously don't have a data protection bill, and that's something that we've dancing around for a couple of years before. So we just wanted to understand, how the data protection the regiment in India is fundamentally going to change the insurance sector. And the second part of that question would be, what are some of the key learnings that we've taken from global best practices and something that we've implemented in India so far?
So I think the good thing is whether the protection bill is here or not. I think all of them, at least the larger companies, and I'm sure all of the panelists would agree, that we are following what is called as the generally accepted privacy principles. We call it as GAPP, right? And that is as simple as taking the consent of the user. Today, in the insurance contract, there are clauses clearly says that, hey, I'm going to take the following information, and this I am taking an explicit consent for you. Likewise, the insurance companies or the processors, because many times what happens, you have a range of vendors who are supplying or helping them out, right? It could be the surveyors, assessors, underwriters, etc. All of them, the insurance companies are asking them to clearly sign off a data protection agreement, which means the user data is definitely being focused upon. We are sort of saying that, hey, whether the regulation comes in or not, right? It's a question of formalizing setup. And let's be reminded that it doesn't mean that India does not have a privacy act, right? If you'll go through your Information Technology Act, there there is definitely provisions in terms of how the user data has to be protected. While I agree it is not a legislature as large by itself, but it could probably manifest, and one could still go ahead and file penalties or cases against the Information Technology Act, right? But that's on the negative side. But if you look onto the positive side, there is a lot of information which is being captured. The second, we have understood that the more the data we capture about a user or about the insured, it is that much more relevant, right? And today this is happening through multiple methods. A method number one is there is a pure play insure tech company through which I have either invested or it's my own subsidiary. I am sort of taking their help to manage certain things, or I've hired contractors or people who have expertise in machine learning, data mining, etc., who's working for me. Or third, I am having my own IT teams, which is sort of future looking or a modernized setup. And all of these folks are also being trained that, hey, while you do all of this, right, it's very pertinent that you protect the user data, right? And those sort of thought process is definitely coming in. And not to forget, many of the insurance companies reinsure their risk with foreign insurance companies as well, which means there is definitely an element of data, at least if not at an individual level, at least at the group level or probably based on the geographic level, etc., which is being shared. Like, what is the risk which I have in terms of a health insurance? Okay, I am insuring an age group of 20 to 30, right? The possibility of a risk is much higher. Therefore, the reinsurance premium is way, way lesser because I know that the possibility of an attack is much lesser. On the contrary, right, I am actually having a age group of 55 to 60, right? If it is a corporate policy or whatnot, right? So obviously the risk is much higher. Now, I am not going to share, oh, hey, this is Mr. A's health record, this is B's health record. No, I am going to generalize it. I'm going to anonymize it. And those systems are also in place. And it is not that they're doing only now, it has been historically being done, right? But the enhanced focus and the fact that the consumers are becoming more and more aware is a very important thing. Because today, anytime, a simple example, right? If anybody asks your PAN or Aadhaar, we ask them twice, hey, why are you asking this? Right? So the awareness with the consumers also has significantly increased, and that is equally taken by the insurance companies as their responsibility to protect the privacy. I think that's it.
Absolutely. In fact, all of the points covered are absolutely true. In fact, every even the most like simple layman that completely does not understand this ecosystem, and I would completely agree. I am not somebody that is fully in the ecosystem like you guys are. But even when I am asked a couple of times, or like somebody that it's not even somebody that's in the ecosystem, I would remove myself as well. Like even when my maid is somebody that might not necessarily be fundamentally aware of their right to privacy, but even when they're asked for their, personal documents, they hesitate the second time or the first time you ask. They're like, why do you need it? Give me an explanation or give me an understanding. So consent is becoming more and more
You're on a
in
call.
that ecosystem.
You're on a call.
Kamika.
We just wanted to build off from this, and this is a question that's open to the entire panel. Anybody, please feel free to pick it up because I think everybody with your expertise can contribute to this. Privacy enhancing technologies, right? Let's say encryption or encryption tools and private. Just so you have a whole host of these things, anonymization, all of these tools. Technological interventions have been suggested as a solution for making it easier for the data fiduciary to protect itself against liabilities, right? And because the insurance sector also will fall under the purview of a data fiduciary, we were wondering what are some of the interventions that have already been tried and tested, some of the interventions that you rely upon, so we can get a clearer understanding of what are some of the technical interventions we have at the moment. So anybody, please feel free to go ahead and pick the question.
Okay, I'll probably pick it up, just to give a heads up on that. I think the first principle and the first practice which was started is categorizing the PII information. I think that's the first critical step, and that's where most of them have started. And please be reminded that it is not an easy affair. I have probably about 100,000 odd policy holders, and I have a simple master data of them in my organization. And I'm sure there's a problem with every other organization going forward, right? Today we're talking about insurance, tomorrow it could be healthcare, day after it could be anything else, right? So we're having customer data. The first step was to identify, it is more not of a tool, rather of a process. Which of them is PII and which of them is not, right? And that is where your whole exercise of discovery is something which significantly people spend. The moment that realized, right, luckily in the case of insurance you have a software solution, an ERP equivalent, or the AS400 or whatever not, right? You have the data stored within that, and you have identified, okay, these are the critical tables where the data PII is being stored. Great. But now the consumer interaction was not from an agent to the insurance company, but now it is going from the consumer to the insurance company directly. So I have a login account where I have a lot of operations which I can do. I have a mobile app, and therefore the mobile app tracks a lot of information. And therefore, the second layer which brings in is a tool which is helping me to track the PII information. It could be cookies, it could be the extent of personal information, right? Probably I would simply call it as a repository, right? And these two are the first two milestones. And obviously, these have to be encrypted, these have to be secured, adequately backed up, and whatnot, the general standard security principles, right? So that is something which has to be obviously taken into consideration. Then comes the modern element. If I'm dealing with a website, I need to have a cookie management solution. If I'm dealing with a mobile app in terms of a chatbot, how is the chatbot capturing the information, right? So these are where the solutions are slowly coming into picture. And this is the first set of tools which is sort of coming into picture. And then when it comes to a little more, we have to have the claim processing agents. They need to have DLP solutions, data loss prevention, so that they don't take the Aadhaar card of this person and sort of send it, right? And now insurance companies, or for the matter banks, are asking, hey, can you give me your Aadhaar card which is masked? Right? Can you give me your PAN card which is digitally downloaded where it is masked, right? So I know that some sort of a data is protected. So it is to do with tools as well as process, and obviously the people will have to drive that.
Sure, absolutely. In fact, just picking off that question, Mr. Satyanandan, I just wanted to know, as because you brought up data governance best practices that organizations have from a business standpoint, right? So, do you think there's been a significant uptick in the past couple of years that across the board, not even the big insurance companies, but even the smaller practitioners in the field have been picking it up and sort of having a data governance best practice in the organization? And what are some of the key principles that they want to, cover, some of the pillars of data governance that they want to cover?
Well, from a perspective of privacy and from a perspective of data governance being a broader subject, privacy becomes one of the principles of the data governance itself. So I think data governance has multiple aspects with regards to how the data is stored, how data could be retrieved, and how data could be easily could be archived itself. So I think the privacy, from a perspective of privacy, I think the whatever Mr. Narasimhan has mentioned, it is a greater extent. I think the ecosystem of how a customer interacts with the organization and how the organization secures the data, and how organization also forwards the data to the third party service providers in the case of processing, and how it discloses the data to the customer back. So the entire life cycle is again is composed of multiple tools and technologies where which is intertwined with the process and also have a intervention of the people. So there is a greater amount of data governance at each stage, because when you have data even in the physical forms, you need some amount of rational governance mechanisms there. So it's not only the data governance at the system side or the infrastructure or the application side. It's the physical storage of data and how exactly you could retrieve, and how you could mask, how you could anonymize the data in the systems itself. So I think the principles, what I would say, if you go 10 years back, the principles of data governance, which was more around integrity of the data, confidentiality, availability, then from a privacy control, from a cyber security control, from archival, from ability to retrieve, from ability to anonymize. I think all those principles which are part of the data governance was more of not a very orchestrated subject, which was part of the design of the systems. I think data governance has evolved the period of last 3-4 years, when these all principles are intertwined, and now it is baked as part of the design of the systems itself. So there's a more professional approach. I think all insurance companies, I think in India and abroad, I think I would not say India is catching up. I think all these basic principles are part of the entire design of how systems are built and how process are operating in the organizations. So but more of a subject of a data-led insurance, from a how we want to look into it. I think the way Anil mentioned, from an underwriting controls, the ethics of how you collect the data, and how the principles around ethics and the principles around privacy of how you underwrite the data, or how you collect the data and then you use for underwriting purposes, and then how you write a right risk and reject a correct risk and accept a, or reject an incorrect risk and accept a correct risk. So I think this is where the evolution has to happen, and the evolution is also happening because I think the sensitive point which Mr. Anil mentioned about the human values. I think the human aspect of how the data led insurance has to happen is that typically when you onboard a health insurance or a motor insurance, I think it's not only the if you see insurance companies, they don't only look into the data that is provided in the proposal form. There is a more amount of intervention that happens through an outbound call center. They call up the customer and get into more questions because the human aspect of underwriting and the ethics aspect of underwriting has to be bought in. So when you talk about privacy, when you talk about ethics, and when you talk about underwriting, I think all these are intertwined. So I think so when you talk about again a data governance as a subject, it transfers across all these subjects. So it's a transversal control which is already embedded. I think every organization in India, I would say, are evolved and have these best practices already inbuilt into their systems and processes.
Yeah, actually, I'll add something to what these two gentlemen said. I'm from a civil society, so my narrative and viewpoint is slightly very, very different. So, if you look at the whole, India is the world's largest democratic country, and we are yet to have a privacy law. I mean, I'm not saying that it's not the end of the story. So, the IT Act is there, the Digital Media Ethics Code is also there. Most of them actually, uh, nothing happens to that. And for example, if you look at CIBIL, if I apply for a loan, CIBIL tells me that somebody actually has validated me. So CIBIL tells me back. But the same case in Aadhaar, it doesn't do that. So I do not know who is actually validating, other than I give an OTP. So I think the context has to be properly set. If you look at scrims too, I mean, there are a lot of privacy violations. I know there's a GDPR when technology companies, doing the best, the kind of global use cases they have, the kind of technology evolution that is happening, definitely. But there is a lack of enforcement, and insufficient control by authorities. The authorities themselves do not know. So then there's again a strong lobbyism is also which is happening at the back. And with great difficulty, the privacy law came into the parliament and it went back again. The same way it went back again. They said it will come back next year again. So I think this lack of implementation of expert knowledge is also not there. Such well-read people are there around DSCI. Why not they also participate in the governance model and write down some principles? Actually, there's violation of fundamental rights. There's a lot of. I mean, for me as a civil society, I look at it from a surveillance right to surveillance. So I think there is a fear among everybody that what this data is doing. And when I talk about India is supposed to be the world's techiest country, and we need to be much more a step ahead than anybody else. And I mean for me it looks like it should not do a surveillance as a business model. Otherwise it will become a feudal internet. I'm sorry if I'm hurting anybody, but as a social activist, that's what I feel. Like the privacy has to be taken more into consideration.
Absolutely. Absolutely, sir. Because I think that's such a interesting, quite like interesting way of looking at the entire ecosystem. Because obviously there is a need for digital innovation, while that need has to be balanced against, business innovation, and that need has to be balanced against the genuine sort of security and privacy sort of implications for the individual at the core, right? Because there's often that question of, am I providing you a good service, or am I still balancing your fundamental right against that, right? And in fact, I want to just because we lost Mr. Srinath for a while. Now that he's back, I just wanted to get your opinion of what do you think are some of the as the individual, as the participant in the ecosystem, not from the perspective of the industry, but as a participant in the ecosystem, what are some of the best practices that we ourselves can take, to make sure that we're not giving away too much information, unnecessary information, that we are, we're sort of aware of the fact that we aren't being sort of exploited in the process. What are some of the practices that we as individuals can sort of pick up and make sure that we're implementing from day one? If we are to, if we were to go to an insurance company, what are some of the practices that we should keep in mind?
Well, Anisha, you see, if you see the data, what work we require in the insurance industry. Suppose, as Anil was saying that underwriting practices are entirely depends on the data. So you need to collect the personal information, because you need to collect the age, you need to collect the gender and family history and his habits and occupation. And so there is a lot of amount of data is required to assess the risk. So at the same time, we need to protect this data from so many factors. So, like say, we have seen cyber thefts, and so on. All these things are there. So, we as an individual, you need to be very conscious while giving the data. But subsequently, what is happening? So, if you want to you take insurance policy, you need to give entire data. So, it is so insurance companies has to protect the personal data, and they should use very consciously.
Absolutely. Fair point, because I think this is a sector that fundamentally needs data to survive, and a lot of data has to be collected. So that's a fair point. Just picking off that, and this again is an open question to the group, is now that we understand, we understand that these are the challenges, but this is the innovation, and we've fundamentally been able to grow. The industry has changed. There has been, fundamental growth in the past couple of years. We also wanted to know where we're going from here, right? So where does the Indian insurance sector, what are some of the key sort of aspirational pillars that we're looking at? What does it look like for the sector for the next 5 years? At least from the perspective of data, where are we going? Are we adapting to new technologies? Are we adapting to new interventions? So just wanted to understand where the next steps are, where the next sort of horizon is for us.
So, I mean, data technologies are dependent on the availability of the data, the amounts of the data. So, insurers produce and gather this data from various sources, and allow their consumers to opt into telematics, wearables, and other Internet of Things, etc. So these IoT devices are built, and they collect data, and they analyze the insurance consumer behavior also. So that is where the core point, which is revolving around all the data. So from that, the physical activity as well as driving habits, and informed underwriting, so they can monitor their property as well. And so there are so many advantages. So this can be used to assess the risk, and also prevent the risk and mitigate the risk. So thereby, this the data can be used in many ways here.
Does anybody want to add to this? Does anybody want to add to the final question? Because I think we don't have any audience questions at the moment. So this is the last question that we have open-ended. So please feel free to give your sort of wrap-up remarks, or your closing remarks, or even just answer the question. Yeah, so please, we can go one by one.
I think from my angle, it is see, there are angles from both the things, right? One is the insurance company trying to capture more and more information for obvious reasons, that they want to give better customized rates and quotations, right? Earlier, it was more or less a one size fits all. If your age was 30 or your age was 35 and you were a non-smoker, and therefore this is your insurance premium. And even now it is happening, right? But this will mature. This will have more and more information, right? So that is one area which I think is sort of changing, right? The second perspective is the comfort with the user interaction. We are having more and more chatbot based, WhatsApp based, and whatnot, so much of information being shared. So the user interaction is going to be more and more automatically driven. And let it be very clear, right? On an average, insurance company pays anywhere between 10 to 20% as a agent fee towards the commission, because he actually acquires the customer, and as per IRDA regulations, each of them vary, right? Now, if this entire thing is built with tech, right, now there is a huge saving on that percentage, right? And 10 to 20% of the premium is massive, right? Especially considering the risk which they take, right? We might think, hey, what is it? I'm paying 10 or 20,000 as premium, and 10% is very small. But actually, no. If you look from an insurance company, that is massive, right? So therefore, that is one of the things which is going to change with more and more technology coming in. And today we are having a concept of direct to customer, D2C model, right? So the D2C model is something which is enhancing, and we are seeing few of these players, right? Some of them advertise that, hey, if you're buying the car first take the insurance with me before even checking outside, right? And you get a discount, and we see those sort of advertisements. So we're talking about new models coming up, right? The reason is because obviously he wants to be the first one to capture the market, and he knows the first year none of them will go for a claim, because first year my car is as delicate as I would want to drive it and keep it safeguarded, right? And until that first scratch take place, and then I'm okay with it, right? So fun apart. So those are the elements which is actually being driven, and I am seeing more and more innovative technologies coming in. I'm expecting things like your cars would have IoT sensors which would give some information to your insurance company saying where exactly the incident took place. Your claim processing could happen much more faster. And those of you who have time, there is a very interesting video on YouTube where it says, how digital IoT and insurance can go hand in glove, right? So the moment your one car is hit by the other car, right, or there's a small accident, the IoT sensor sends a message. There is an automated AI algorithm which sends a message, the car smart system, which is, hey, I understand that your car is injured. Are you all right? Do I have to send an Uber? I'm going to send a drone to do a surveillance and whatnot. I mean, I'm talking about two futuristic things, but I think these are things which will slowly transition. And I find the future is very, very exciting. But the role of us as professionals is to understand the potential of technology, but still be grounded with the fact that what is the risk which it can pose. And if we are able to balance both of them, I think we have a great road ahead.
Absolutely, absolutely. Mr. Satyanandan, Mr. Anil, and do either of you want to pick up from this? Mr. Anil, I think you're on mute. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, what he said is very encouraging, but the other side of the story, being pessimistic, is, let's say, digital dilemma. So I'm on a crossroad and two roads are there, and there are people on the both sides, and my brake gets jammed. What is IoT, AI, and ML going to do? So I think, I mean, all of you are well-read guys. I've seen your profiles, your masters in your own fields, but I think there is an element of privacy which is always breached. If that can be taken care, I think that's good. At the end of the day, yes, people should get, as Narasimhan was saying, that the best policy comes in only when you read somebody in detail. So I think I do agree as part of it, but I think there is an underlining word called ethics. To what extent that we could do a surveillance. So, for example, I stay in a city called Hyderabad, so it is the most populated cameras everywhere, and I'm afraid every time. So I'm asked to actually stand properly, work properly, and everything. I mean, sometimes it's all about digital dilemma. That's what I would say, and privacy should be the top concern for everybody. I know all of you are technically great. Risk profiles have seen you, but I think have that risk as part of it.
Absolutely. Thanks, Mr.
Privacy
Anil.
as part of it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Mr. Satyanandan, any closing remarks that you might have?
I think I and Anil come from a bit of a controlled mindset, and I think the ecosystem of society needs people from a very enterprising mindsets and from a control mindsets. I think that's how society is built. So I think nevertheless, from a perspective of what Mr. Narasimhan mentioned and what Mr. Anil mentioned, I think all the points are acknowledged. I think all the audience would also echo with the very point. The privacy is a concern, but I think how you build, the ecosystem of right insurance product and right service. I think there is amount of data which an organization would require to really underwrite the risk. But to an extent, I would agree with Anil that how much of this would be of actual material use, because the privacy principles also talks about the data what you consume is actually what it is required, and so there is a need-based principle. And even you talk about cyber security, there is always a need-based principle. So typically, if you talk about any of those principles which are of a control mindset, it talks about consume what you need. So from that perspective, I think it is it echoes well, and at any point of time, I think no organization would like to capture data which is of no use to it, because the amount of cost, the storage, and the amount of resources it requires to store and process the data, it is huge, and it is humongous, because and you have 100 regulations to manage, because when you start capturing multiple data, you also need to also see that how you manage the regulations around it. So and so therefore it is quite imperative, as an insurance company, when you say data led insurance, I think how you efficiently use the data, how you take the endurance, to take the minimum capture of data, make the best use of the data, and deliver the best insurance product for the customer. I think this all three would echo well with the customer. This all three would echo well with the organization, which is cost, which is obligations on the regulations, and also will echo well with the overall ecosystem of the society itself. So I think the future, what Mr. Narasimhan had an enterprising view of how the future is going to be there. So I think a lot of products are already there where the regulator has given sandboxing provisions to create products around where you have use base your use base how you use a motor vehicle basis your behavior and basis your usage, your insurance premiums are being computed. So therefore there is an additional leg of data which is getting captured. Now you could always say, because of this additional leg of data, do you really get into the privacy concerns of where you are getting into the? But again, is the customer benefiting out of it? Yes, the customer is benefiting out of it. He is paying insurance premium basis its use. So therefore, there has to be some amount of balance, that where exactly, if at all, because the parameters which are now insurance companies capturing was not captured earlier. But now what is benefiting the customer is that he's paying the premium as per his use. So which also means that the premium outgo for a customer is also reduced. Now there could be a privacy concern that why should this be captured and why cannot a lower premium be charged? Then you cannot charge a lower premium or premium adequacy basis its usage if you don't have the data. So it's a catch-22 principle. So there is an enterprising view. So the enterprise view of having right usage of data, creating better products for the customer. Till the point this principle is being addressed, I think capturing data from a perspective of from a customer point of view, from a privacy point of view, should not be a concern. Till the point organization is able to manage the data from a cost perspective, from a regulations perspective, and it is benefiting the customer, I think the data-led insurance has a huge future for the everybody.
Absolutely. Thank you, speakers. This has been a really, really fruitful session. Everybody with your incredible insights and actually really interestingly opposing points of views, because we don't usually get that, because oftentimes everybody concurs and there's a very understanding, everybody says, yes, yes, yes. But this is actually an interesting panel because, we had opposing points of view and we had a little bit of friction, but healthy friction. And that's always fantastic as a moderator, when you have a little bit of excitement in the panel. So thank you so much for joining us. We request the audience and the panelists to please head to stage 1, where we have the diversity track led by Target happening. So please head on over, and thank you everyone for joining us for this session. See you tomorrow. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.